Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Crissy Piper, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I am your host, Crissy Piper. And on this week's episode, I have a true badass suburban warrior joining me today. I would say that you have to be if you are in the C-suite of the Harley Davidson company. And I know that because I grew up on the back of a Harley Davidson riding along with my dad. And I know that you have to have some pretty thick skin and be pretty tough in order to hang with that crowd. And let me tell you, I absolutely loved it. So here to share her story with us today is Shelley Paxton. Think Brene Brown meets Biker Babe with a dash of Liz Gilbert. As former chief marketing officer of Harley Davidson, Shelley found herself at the top of the proverbial mountain, feeling success empty instead of success full. That awakening led her on a profound soul-batical journey that became her mission, business, and best-selling book, Soul-Batical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life, named #1 on Forbes 21 books to read in 2021 list. She's leading a rebellion to rewrite the script of success and liberate 1 billion souls. Man, do I love everything about that. I mean, you're just reading that is awesome. You sound like literally, like I said, a true badass and suburban warrior. So I am super excited to welcome you to the podcast, Shelley.
Oh, Crissy, I'm so excited to be here. We are kindred spirits. I know this much already.
We are warriors for women and warriors really for just humanity to find joy in this journey of life, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So, okay, well then let's just dive right into it because I'm so excited to hear about you. So obviously you wrote this amazing book. We're going to get into that. I want to hear so much about it. I love the title of it, Soul-Batical. So, but first let's hear a little bit about you.
Yeah. I mean, where to start?
Where to start is right.
I mean, it's a beautiful intro. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where to start, but obviously you're super successful. You found success in the corporate world and, you were the chief marketing officer of Harley Davidson. Right there, that's intriguing to me because I just know from experience in the corporate world. And like I said, being around, the Harley Davidson crowd, I'm sure being a woman in the C-suite of Harley Davidson was not an easy task.
No, not at all. And I'll give a little context. I think that the Harley years are kind of the pivotal years that, defined this trajectory that I'm now on. And so that's an important thing for you and I to dig into. I'll give a little bit of context that you didn't say in the bio. So my corporate career was 26 amazing years, and it was wildly successful by all traditional, definitions of success, which I always say is like, we're taught when we're growing up, at least most of us are conditioned. That's like, you tick this box that says big title. You tick this box that says big paycheck. You tick this box that says, the house and the cars and the things, right? All of it. And, for me, it was also tick the box of sexy brands. In that 26 years, I was in advertising and marketing across multiple industries, and I was stewarding some really, really incredible brands, Visa and AOL. And you mentioned Harley Davidson, which was kind of my last stop on the corporate train, and McDonald's, and so many other incredible brands that took me around the world. And what's really interesting is that I got so caught up in all of that. And you probably relate to this. Like, I was caught up in the shininess and the sexiness and the ticking the box of all of it, that I never stopped to realize, like, that wasn't my dream. I was having fun and I don't regret a second of it, but I was living flat out. This is what I realized. And I opened my book with this. I was living my dad's dream.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's so important. Like, that's a crucial element of my story, is just that wake up call of like, wow, I worked really hard. I was like clawing and striving and doing all the things for something that didn't really light me up at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point. And I can relate. I mean, different industry, but I was in sales and marketing and pharmaceuticals. And, I landed this amazing job and had a great career and rose up the corporate ladder and had the titles and the big paycheck and the this and the that and everything that on paper, the trips and everything. So fun. It was like the best. But at the end of the day, looking back, it took having, 4 kids and getting to a point where I was physically, and mentally exhausted and ill to really realize, like, what am I doing this for? I'm doing it because, again, it ticked all the boxes. It was like what we're supposed to do. And was I good at it? Yes. Was I having some fun in it? Sure. But it wasn't my dream. And when I think we all experience a pivotal point, or we hope to really say, wait a second, this isn't my dream. And I only get one spin here. So like, let me pursue what is my dream. And I think that's an amazing wake up call.
Yeah. And I love that you and I are having this conversation right now, because I've had a series of wake up calls, many of which I ignored along the way. And then my final wake up call came when I was at Harley. So I was at Harley for a total of 6.5 years, and about 5.5 years into my career there, I was 45 years old. And I think it's like the universe and my soul conspired to go, okay, we've whispered, we've shouted, and now we're going to like whack you with the proverbial 2x4.
Right.
And we are going to shake you until you get it and you start listening. And so I started having this like devastating nightmare. 5 nights a week, it would rip me out of my sleep at 2 a.m. I would be soaking wet, crying, literally like a kid. Couldn't get back to sleep, couldn't function. And then I was going every morning back to work, and I was like, put on the makeup, straighten my hair, put on the shiny clothes, put on all the things, like spit polish to a shine, pretend nothing's wrong. Don't show any vulnerability. Don't show any cracks in the armor. But the truth is, just like you described, I was mentally exhausted. I was emotionally broken. I was physically exhausted. I was getting no sleep. And I really didn't know where to turn. And I honestly, at that stage of life, I didn't know how to ask for help, because I think for so long we're taught, or again, conditioned, that, well, you're strong and you've made it this far. It's like a very masculine energy perspective on what leadership looks like. And you don't show those cracks. And God forbid anyone know that you're human and you're suffering, right? So it was tough for me. So I experienced this nightmare for the entire last year that I was at Harley. And it was rough. And that was honestly my final wake up call to say, are you going to listen or are you not going to listen? And when I got still, I actually went to see a doctor, because I was like, I can't sleep. I can't function. I'm becoming dangerous at this point. And he taught me, as one piece of the puzzle, how to meditate. I didn't know what meditation was at 45 years old.
So I think that's really such an interesting point, because And so many of us experience these type of symptoms. I mean, it may not be nightmares, but it could be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not sleeping, aches and pains, like whatever it may be.
Or very severe illness, right? Like our bodies are screaming.
Exactly. Autoimmune, like everything. Yep. Bodies are screaming. For me, it was migraines, but it manifests, the stress manifests somewhere, somehow in our bodies. And yet we just keep pushing. We don't even go to the doctors half the time, right? And we just keep pushing. But I love that meditation was something that was brought up as, you know, okay, we have to calm your nervous system down. We have to calm you down. We have to find that space because, you know, again, when we talk about meditation, that's where in that quiet is when the universe speaks to you, right? When our energies, our body, you know, our soul within can come alive. And you know, no matter what meditation looks like, but just being able to get quiet is so amazing for your body, mind, and soul.
100%. And you said it really beautifully, and it can be whatever makes sense for you. Like, I think when I'd heard about meditation, I thought it was this fancy thing and you had to sit cross-legged for an hour and not move and you wore robes and all the things. And now I understand through that experience in my own personal practice for the past 5.5+ years that it's like, it can be as simple as I'm going to take 10 minutes before I let the world in to get quiet and listen deeply. And honestly, what you just described is the entire reason that I'm on the trajectory I'm on, because this doctor was like, you have monkey brain. I need you to read this book, Breakfast with Buddha, and I need you to learn how to sit still, because I was one of those people who wore busyness as a badge of honor. And that's how I was, you know, quote unquote, measuring my worth and my value and my productivity. And so listen, it wasn't easy. And for anybody who doesn't have a get quiet practice or a get meditation practice or a slow down practice, listen, I have all the empathy in the world, because learning how to do this was really hard for me.
Yeah.
Really hard. And it was the greatest gift I've ever been given, because when I started to listen and I started to check in, I understood that what I was seeing in this nightmare was a proxy for my soul. And my soul was screaming out. It was dying. It was malnourished. It was longing for attention. And it was just like, please listen and feed me. And it took me months to figure this out. But the only way I did it and made some progress was because I started to get quiet. And that was the beginning of my own personal revelations, where I was like, oh, wow. Then I started to understand, like, I'm not living my truth. I'm not in tune with what fills me up. I'm living my dad's dream. Like, that was the big, like my head exploded. Oh yeah.
So first of all, so many amazing things in that story, and really being the fact that you were able to get quiet and listen and hear what your truth really was. And like you said, that takes time, and it also takes a lot of courage to do and be able to do that. But so if that's not enough and doesn't take enough courage, then you get some answers. Yeah. Then the hard part really begins, right? Because then it's like, wait a second. I know I'm living this life that isn't exactly for me. I know I'm living someone else's dream. Now what?
Yeah.
Right.
And that is really, I mean, I would say, one of the many through lines, like if there's a golden thread in all of this, it's definitely like, okay, this is going to be scary. Our ego is going to try to protect us throughout this entire journey, and mine did as well. And we're going to tell ourselves all kinds of stories that sound like, it can happen when, X happens, I'll be happy when Y happens. Like, we're going to tell ourselves all the stories,
all the things.
All the things. And the courage really, as you said, is in listening and making a decision to even take one tiny step in the direction of that truth. You don't have to, like, I've always loved the phrase, like, you don't have to eat the elephant at once. Take a little tiny bite of the elephant.
Right.
And when I realized that my soul was like malnourished and crying for attention, I was like, okay, what does that even mean? And I literally wrote these questions out in the book. I was like, so wait a second. If I get quiet and listen deeply, and then I get the next layer of messaging from my soul, what happens if I don't like what she says? Right? You know this one.
Yes. Well,
because that's the scarier part. The scarier part is, well, now you're going to tell me the thing that just puts me in like total deer in the headlights mode. Like, well, how am I going to do that? It's totally outside of my comfort zone. It is the complete unknown. I've never done anything like that. Maybe I don't even have role models for anybody in my life who has done anything like that. All of that stuff is going to be kicked up. And it was for me too. And then ultimately, for me, like I said, I was 45 at the time, into 46. I left Harley when I was 46. And the conversation I started having with myself as I realized that I had been completely separated from my creative soul, that I'd lost touch with my passions. I love travel, but I was only doing it in a business context. I love writing. I'd always dreamed of writing a book, and I stopped writing anything but bullets on a PowerPoint slide, for a board presentation. And I love photography. And I couldn't remember the last time that it wasn't something that I just snapped on my phone. And I just thought, wow. And all of those things, when I thought about it, are things that slow me down and get me back into my body and connect me with nature and the world around me and with wonder and awe. And I'm like, wow, I've just been like, again, reminders that I've just been running breathlessly on this treadmill. No wonder I feel empty and exhausted and, wondering, is this all there is? And so the hard part, you're right, is then putting that into action. Yeah. And one of the questions I asked myself two things that might be relevant for anyone listening. One is, I think oftentimes when we're being called to listen and we sink in and we start to hear that voice, it is an inconvenient truth. And one of my favorite questions that I have asked myself, I've asked to clients, I've asked in big presentations is, what are you pretending not to know?
That's a good one.
Right?
Oh, I love it.
And I have had, and I've done this myself, I've had people just cry on the spot.
I mean, I'm scared to answer that.
I know.
I was
saying, too.
Great question. What are you pretending not to know?
I have full goosebumps.
Me too.
This,
so good. So good.
And so this is honestly so that was the first thing that, I came to grips with, is that, I was pretending not to know that I was living my dad's dream. I was pretending not to know that I had all the, sexiness and shininess and brands and, everything looked pretty and polished on the outside, but that I was completely dying on the inside. Yeah. And I was telling myself, well, it's okay because this is what you do and this is everything you've worked for. And then I got trapped in what I call the shackles of should. Yeah. Because we get trapped in like, well, I should stay on the corporate track because, sunk cost. And I've done this for decades and I'm getting rewarded and people tell me I'm really good at this. Well, guess what? Just because people say you're good at it doesn't mean it makes you happy or brings you joy.
Oh my God, so true. And, I think that when people start to listen to themselves, not even just their self-talk, but when they talk out loud, if they realized how many times they said, I should do this because, or I should do that. Or it's amazing how many times we say the shoulds. Totally. So I love the shackles of should because, when you really dive into it, there's very few things we should be doing.
Right. That's right. My invitation is get curious, right? Don't beat yourself up because you use the word should. Sometimes it makes complete sense to use the word should.
Of course.
However, a lot of the time, if we get curious about, oh, wait a second, why did I say, well, I should do that thing with that person tomorrow night?
Right.
Is it out of guilt, obligation, people pleasing? Like, get curious about what's driving that. This, you're a coach. And, I find that I still have to do this in my life because let's be honest, right? I'm human and I still find myself trapped in the shackles of should. And so I talk about that a fair amount in the book, like what were my 3 big shoulds? Listen, I've had way more than 3 shoulds, but there were 3 shoulds that I kept seeing appear again and again and again in my life. Like I should get married and have kids. I should stay on the corporate track, you name it. So it's interesting because I think in getting curious, we see patterns.
Yeah. Okay. Right? I love it. Yes, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned this amazing question. What are you pretending not to know? Which I think a lot of people that's going to be a light bulb moment for a lot of people listening to this podcast. What's the second question?
Yeah. So the second question I asked myself is, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. So if you continue to live the way you're living now for me, it was 5 years. I was imagining from 45 to 50 years old. I put it in the context of when you're 50 years old, if you continue to live the way that you're living, will you be moving closer to who you want to become or further away? And it was so clear to me that even though I didn't know what any of this meant, and let me be super clear, I didn't know what any of this meant. I made up a word called soulbatical. I gave myself a title called Chief Soul Officer. We can get into what any and all of that means as we dive into this conversation. But the reality is, I had no idea. I was 100% stepping into the unknown because I wanted to invest in the possibility of my future self. And I believed that I needed to and wanted to be operating differently, living differently, leading differently in a way that was more authentic, more courageous, and more purposeful. So when I stepped into the next decade for me, I was getting closer to who I want to become and what I was meant to do on this planet. But, just to be clear, didn't have a clue, no roadmap,
right? Just
no
new
breadcrumbs,
right? No.
Right.
So tell me, I'm glad you brought up soulbatical. So tell me what the word soulbatical means to you. Because obviously, we all know what a sabbatical is, and it's a wonderful thing a lot of times to be able to take a break. And interestingly enough, my husband's company offers, after you're there for 5 years, everybody gets a month sabbatical, which I think is a wonderful perk of being at his company, right? Because everybody needs to check out. Everybody needs a break, from the everyday a little bit, a change of pace, if you will. So tell me what soulbatical means to you.
Well, here's what's really interesting. I have to share the context because I hope that this is inspiring in some way. And again, this is the theme of, sometimes you don't know. So I invented this term because I was desperate. One, I'm a creative person. And 2, I was desperate to create a handle to explain to people what I was doing. Because to go back to our earlier point, I was venturing into the unknown and I didn't have people didn't do this. Like my family was like, you're nuts. Are you okay? Do you need help? My business community was like, who does that? You're in the sexiest job in marketing. Like, why would you leave? Let them fire you. You can imagine like the Greek chorus of all the things. And so I created this almost out of desperation to say, I'm going to go do this cool thing. I'm going to go on a journey that's not a sabbatical and it's not a vacation and it's not necessarily leaving my career. It's an exploration of reconnecting with my soul. That was what it started out as. So here's what's really interesting. I realized over this journey, and I'm still on the journey, that I realized a number of things. So I realized that it doesn't mean leaving your job. It means finding yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I would say is that I am not on a mission. When I say liberate a billion souls, I'm not on a mission to get a billion people to quit their jobs. What I want is more of us. Sabbatical is more of a way of being that's in full alignment with your soul, right?
Yeah.
And it's a conscious choice to live in the way that I said, to live with greater authenticity, greater courage, greater purpose, and to experience true fulfillment. And so had you had this conversation with me 5 years ago, I think I would have still had trouble articulating what does this mean, because I was taking one tiny step in the dark at a time.
Sure.
And once I took enough steps and I was starting to pave my own trail, I'm like, oh, now I get it. I'm trying to help people live their truth and live and lead on their own terms, not what society tells us to do. That's ultimately what sabbatical leads to, right? It's a way of being inside a company, outside a company, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as the CEO of your household. I don't care who you are, what your title is. This is a way all of us can live. And frankly, I'm also a proponent of saying we can all be chief soul officer of our own lives, which means we have an obligation to get quiet, listen deeply, understand our truth. And then that's the inspiration for creating the life we want to create.
Oh boy, I love that. I love that. And I think it speaks to the fact that, we're all so different, right? I mean, and like you said, it's not about leaving your job or leaving anything. It's really about finding your own happiness and fulfillment. And a lot of times it can be within the situation that you're now, it's just adding more practices. It's listening to the inner voice within, or the soul within, and feeding that and finding joy in the everyday. But it takes practice and habit. Yeah,
it does. And it's led me to this concept, which is going to become my second book. So I'm in very early stages. So sneak peek for the Suburban Warrior audience. Yeah. So what Sabbatical has taught me is like, okay, that was the beginning of the journey, but the next part of the journey is this idea of what does it look like to choose to live successful? So you said it in the bio, like I found myself success empty versus successful. So I sat down. Clearly, I love language. I love to create language. And one day I'm like, what does that really mean? Like if I think about, successful versus success empty, and I wrote this definition, I was like, well, successful is this idea that we courageously define success on our terms and in a way that feels fulfilling from the inside out. Right. And in a way that, where we accomplish, or I've said a different way, where our accomplishments and our impact are aligned with our truth. Yeah. And, it gets us away from the checked boxes of what does success look like by, societal standards. And it gets us closer to this idea that success is actually a feeling deep inside. And how cool is it that we can end, and this is what I try to do, and I'm still on this journey, but I love this idea of ending every day feeling full. I may be tired. I may be depleted. I may have left it all out there. But the idea that I feel successful because I knew I had an impact or made a difference. So that's what it is for me. It may be different for you or any of our other warriors, right? And that's for us to define and decide.
Absolutely. And I love that whole thought process of ending every day feeling full, because I focus so much on beginning every day feeling full and feeling abundant, right? But ending every day feeling full is amazing too. Like, and it's like the bookends. And for some reason, probably because I'm so damn tired at the end of the day that, but I love that thought process of it's not just about how you start your day. It's about how you end it as well. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Tell
and
us
I think
a little.
it's the way we ask ourselves. I have to read you this because I was fortunate enough to see Michelle Obama speak to the chief community last night. And I saw a quote from her recently. And so this has been really present for me. And I wrote it down on my phone. And so it just seems so right to share right now.
Yeah.
She says, success isn't about the money you make. It's about the difference you make in people's lives.
Yeah. So
and
true.
so that's her, right? Her, she and Barack Obama are like clearly everything they're doing and creating and the partnerships that they're getting into are to have impact in people's lives. And I think about that too. I'm not going to liberate 1 billion souls in my lifetime. And that's not the goal because I don't intend to do it on my own. I love, finding people like you, and we're on these missions, and then we're inspiring other warriors. And so I think of it as ripples of impact. Like, to me, that's the new ROI. That's part of how I measure success is, you know what? If I was able to inspire one beautiful soul today to think differently or to make a choice that's true to them, damn, that feels successful.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's all that matters. And you can do it by being coaches like we are, being on podcasts, starting a podcast, whatever it may be. But I feel the same way. And I feel like all it takes is maybe smiling at someone in the supermarket or giving them a nice compliment, right? Or, it's just, there's so many little things that we can do throughout our day that can have impact on other people's lives, big and small, right? And the small things I think we tend to overlook sometimes, but sometimes those are the most meaningful, especially, in someone else's life. And then obviously, the more we impact someone else's life, the more our lives are impacted. And, the positivity, just like you said, ripple effect everywhere. So tell us a little bit about, I know, tell us a little bit about the book, Soulbatical.
So it's a wild ride. So if anybody, I'm going to just
I like wild rides. I like them.
I know. Well, you and I, the layers of kindred spirit keep deepening. So
keep going.
So it's a wild ride. So I describe the book as part memoir, part manifesto, part interactive guide. So I set out to tell in a very real, raw, vulnerable way, my own journey of really understanding like this, listening to my soul, making difficult decisions, looking the fear in the eye and, kicking it to the back seat and taking the wheel from it. And then so the manifesto part, I think is probably, so I'm telling my story as, sort of a rebel from the early days and how that has switched from rebelling against to rebelling for, which is very empowering. And I invite all of us to do it. The manifesto part is what we're already talking about. It's the REBELution. It's liberating our own souls, living our truth. So the idea that more and more of us would read this book and be like, I want to live that way in the world, and we inspire each other. And that's another way that the ripples happen. And the interactive guide is the way that I wrote the book, because I have done a lot of coaching in the past, and I believe in the power of reflection. I didn't just want somebody reading about me, because I'm not a famous person. You don't necessarily want all the details of my life. But if I can be a mirror and then hold up some powerful questions to you, like, what are you pretending not to know?
Yeah.
That's what powerful. I do. So at the end of each section of the book, I kind of have a soul search where there's a list of, anywhere from 6 to 10 questions. It's like, okay, we've talked about authenticity and you've heard my story. Now I would love for you, encourage you to sit down and reflect on your own story and your own journey and see what insights come up. And then I have a little bit of a framework where it's like, great, whatever insights are coming up, here's a way to put those into action. So that's the construct of how the book is written. And listen, the book and the audiobook I narrated. So if you just want to listen to me talk, if for whatever reason, like you're grooving on this, get the audiobook. It's like awesome. Me sitting next to you on the couch. And that's the feedback that I've gotten from people is like, people who know me and don't know me were like, you were just there with me the whole time. And you'll love this. I wrote the book because I wanted to be there with every woman and man and whoever and however you identify. I want to be with you on this journey because I didn't feel like I had that support. So I wrote the book that I would have loved to read when I left Harley. And I wrote it as a real raw way of me putting my arm around you and saying, I got you. And that's what I write in the intro. So that's what it is. It's taking you on the journey of like, what did my journey to my, the subtitle is A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life. The idea is like, what did my journey look like? What are some of my tricks? What are the things that I had to learn over and over again? And what are some of the concepts and language that came up as a result? So it is a fun and wild ride. I've been told from people that it's a pretty fast read. The slow down part is the reflections, the interactive guide part. But yeah, that's probably the best description of my baby.
Well, that sounds really awesome. And, I do think that we all need someone or something to sort of put their arm around us and say, and guide us a little bit. And that's why, reading a great book and being able to take a piece of inspiration from it and having it change your life is so important. And, listen, I'm sure it wouldn't be on the number one on Forbes 21 books to read in 21 list if it wasn't absolutely fantastic. So I know I'm super excited to get it and read it myself and to do the reflections, because I know it's so easy to just keep going along in our busy lives and not take the time to reflect. And even as a coach, I have to constantly remind myself to do these things, to take the time to reflect, to quiet, to meditate, because it is so important and it's absolutely life-changing when you do it. Yeah, so I would encourage.
I'm still trying to follow the advice of my book.
We all do. I joke around. I say, the reason I became a coach is really just to kind of coach myself through life. It's really what it's all about. But I have so enjoyed meeting you and hearing about your story and about all of your successful journey, as well as your success empty, right? Because that's what it's all about. Yeah. It's about recognizing where we are on the journey, and when we're not feeling it, time to make a change. So good for you for really following your truth and your authenticity, because I know how courageous that is. So I really hope that our listeners enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, but I would encourage everyone to check out Soulbatical. I'm sure they can find it on Amazon.
Anywhere. Amazon, your favorite bookstore. Yes. Yeah,
it's everywhere. And I love the idea of the audiobooks. It's so easy. And then tell us, what is your Instagram?
So Instagram is at Soulbatical.
Awesome.
Right now, it may be changing to my name, but that doesn't matter. Right now, it's at Soulbatical. Soulbatical is spelled with 2 B's and 1 T, just so everybody knows. It's a made up word. And my website is soulbatical.com. So honestly, and if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm Shelley Paxton. So
I love it. It's
fairly simple. And I have a podcast as well called Rebel Souls. It's on a slight hiatus right now, but if you want to continue this conversation about flipping the middle finger to the status quo and your life and business in the world, let's have a conversation.
Let's do it. I love it. Okay. So I'm super excited. I'm going to check out your podcast, get the book, and do it all. You are an awesome, awesome lady and a true suburban warrior. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Guys, be sure to check out Shelley Paxton on LinkedIn or at Soulbatical on Instagram. And thank you so much for being with us. We will be back next week with another amazing warrior story for you. See you next time.